It was the kind of evening that seemed to hold its breath, the sky painted in hues of gold and amber as the sun lazily descended beyond the horizon. The year was 1937, a time when the world teetered on the brink of transformation, caught between the lingering shadows of the past and the uncertain dawn of the future. In Lakehurst, New Jersey, the air was thick with anticipation, as if the very atmosphere sensed what was to come. Among those gathered was a young radio journalist named Edward Riley. At just 27, Edward had a penchant for storytelling, his voice a familiar companion to many who tuned in to hear news from the world beyond their own. He stood with his leather-bound notebook in hand, eyes fixed on the giant airship that loomed like a leviathan in the sky, the Hindenburg. Edward was one of the fortunate few tasked with covering its arrival, a symbol of human ingenuity and the promise of a new era of air travel. The Hindenburg, a flying colossus, had captured the imagination of the masses. Its sleek, silvery body was a marvel, gliding gracefully across the heavens, embodying both luxury and modernity. For Edward, it was not just a story, it was history in the making, a chance to witness a marvel of engineering that was said to bridge the gap between continents as effortlessly as a bird on the wing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the lights of the landing field flickered to life, casting long shadows that danced across the tarmac. Edward could feel the cool breeze against his skin, a reminder of the chill that often accompanied May evenings. He pulled his coat tighter around him, his mind racing with thoughts of how he might capture this moment, not just in words, but in emotion, in the very essence of what it meant to be part of this unfolding story. The station manager had been clear: convey the grandeur, the spectacle, the hope that traveled with every passenger aboard that vessel. Yet Edward knew that behind the facade of progress, there were always stories waiting to be uncovered. Stories of the people who lived in the shadows of giants, those who dared to dream of a future written among the clouds. As he waited, Edward thought of his wife Clara and their small apartment on the bustling streets of New York City. Clara, ever supportive of his ambitions, had encouraged him to chase stories that stirred his soul. She understood the fire that burned within him, the desire to connect the dots of humanity through the lens of his pen and voice. Edward often found himself narrating tales to her late into the night, her laughter and thoughtful questions a guiding light in his own narrative journey. This assignment had captivated Clara's imagination as much as his own. They had spent evenings poring over newspaper articles, imagining the lives of those who traveled in such splendor, thousands of feet above the earth. The Hindenburg was more than just a vessel. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to what humankind could achieve when they reached beyond the confines of their terrestrial limitations. As Edward stood on the field, he was not alone in his anticipation. A crowd had gathered, their collective curiosity palpable. Families with children perched on shoulders, their eyes wide with wonder. Reporters jostling for the best vantage point, their cameras poised to capture history. Engineers and mechanics who had labored behind the scenes, ensuring every rivet and panel was in place, now watched with pride and a hint of anxiety. The scene was serene, yet underneath a current of excitement flowed, a shared understanding that they were all witnesses to something extraordinary. The world outside might have been fraught with challenges, but here, in this moment, there was a unity, a collective breath held as the Hindenburg approached, its engines a distant hum in the fading light. Edward felt his pulse quicken, the air electric with possibility. He imagined the stories of those aboard, a tapestry of lives interwoven with ambition and adventure. Businessmen and tourists, crew members and engineers, all bound together in this airborne odyssey. Each had their own reason for boarding, their own hopes and dreams cradled within the vast belly of the ship. The minutes stretched into an eternity, a hushed anticipation cloaking the field. Edward knew this was the calm before the storm, a fleeting moment of serenity before history would be irrevocably altered. For now, though, in this precious sliver of time, the world stood still, united in its gaze upward, waiting for the future to descend from the heavens. As the sun dipping below the horizon on that fateful May evening, the sky over Lakehurst was painted with hues of deep orange and soft purple. The air was warm, carrying with it the sweet scent of spring blossoms, mingling with the faint odor of engine oil and kerosene. There was a palpable excitement among the gathered crowd beneath the looming silhouette of the Hindenburg, a majestic leviathan suspended by the most fragile of elements, hydrogen. Among the spectators stood the Capel family, their eyes wide with wonder. Young Peter Kappel, just 10 years old, clutched his father's hand tightly, his heart racing with the thrill of seeing such an enormous airship. His father, Heinrich, a German immigrant, had brought his family to witness this marvel of human ingenuity and engineering. It was a testament to a new era, a time when technology promised to shrink the world and bring distant lands closer together. Heinrich, a machinist by trade, marveled at the Hindenburg not just for its size, but for what it represented: progress, hope, and a bridge between continents. He had left Germany years ago, seeking a better life in America, and seeing the Hindenburg felt like a reunion of sorts, a piece of his homeland hovering above him. His wife, Clara, stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the fading light, filled with a mix of pride and apprehension. She had heard whispers of the risks associated with hydrogen, but trusted in the assurances of the engineers who declared it safe. As dusk settled, the gentle hum of the crowd's chatter was punctuated by the sporadic clicks of cameras and the occasional exclamation of awe. The Hindenburg floated gracefully, an icon of 1930s modernity, its silver skin glinting in the waning light. The world was vulnerable then, perched on the precipice of change, with technology advancing faster than the collective understanding of its potential dangers. Yet in that moment, none of it seemed to matter. The airship was a beacon of possibility, a promise of a future unbound by the limitations of the past. As hours turned into an agonizing wait, a subtle unease began to ripple through the crowd. The air felt heavier, charged with an almost imperceptible tension. Heinrich noticed the change first, a slight shift in the atmosphere, like the silent approach of a storm. He squeezed Peter's hand a little tighter, as if anchoring them both against the growing disquiet. Clara glanced at him, their eyes meeting in a shared, unspoken understanding. The sky, once a tranquil canvas, had begun to darken ominously. Clouds gathered on the horizon, casting shadows that danced across the ground. The gentle breeze now carried a chill, whispering through the trees and rustling leaves with a foreboding murmur. The world's vulnerability lay not in the airship itself, but in the human hubris that believed it untouchable. As the evening wore on, the Hindenburg began its descent, preparing to dock. Heinrich watched the crew on the ground, their movements precise and rehearsed, their faces a mask of concentration. But even from a distance, he could see the subtle tension in their postures, a reflection of the growing apprehension that now gripped the crowd. By the time the city woke to a new dawn, the world would have changed irrevocably. But in those final moments before disaster struck, time seemed to stretch, each second a heartbeat held in suspense. Heinrich pulled Peter closer, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders as if to shield him from what was to come. Suddenly, the first signs of trouble arrived, subtle yet undeniable. A flicker of light danced along the airship's surface, a brief, ethereal glow that could have been mistaken for a trick of the evening light. But for those who watched with bated breath, it was a harbinger of something far more sinister. Peter felt his father's grip tighten, heard his mother's sharp intake of breath. Around them, the crowd shifted, a ripple of uncertainty spreading like a wave. The promise of progress and safety seemed to waver, teetering on the brink of calamity. The air was thick with anticipation, the collective heartbeat of those gathered synchronizing in a shared moment of dread. In that suspended breath, the Kappels, like so many others, stood on the edge of a world about to be irrevocably altered. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of 1,000 possibilities, each one branching out into futures unknown. And in the heart of that storm of anticipation, Heinrich whispered a silent prayer, a plea for safety in a world that seemed, for a moment, to hold its breath along with them. The late afternoon sun hung low, casting a golden sheen over the Lakehurst Naval Air Station. Its rays glinted off the sleek, silver skin of the Hindenburg as it approached. To the onlookers gathered below, the airship was a marvel of human ingenuity, a floating palace suspended between earth and sky, promising a future where the world felt smaller and dreams seemed within arm's reach. Amidst the crowd stood Anna Muller, clutching the hand of her young son, Karl. They had traveled from Frankfurt, hoping to reunite with Anna's husband, who had settled in New York months earlier. For them, the Hindenburg was more than just a vessel. It was the bridge to a new life, a beacon of hope. As Anna watched the dirigible descend, she felt the excitement in her chest, a fluttering that matched the graceful, almost ethereal movement of the airship. The sky was an endless tapestry of blues and purples, the air crisp with the promise of spring. The soft murmur of anticipation swirled around her, the crowd's chatter a gentle hum beneath the calls of the crew preparing for landing. But then, just as the Hindenburg began to maneuver into position, a sudden shift in the breeze caught the attention of the ground crew. The wind had picked up, unpredictable and capricious, whispering secrets of uncertainty as it rustled through the nearby trees. For a moment, Anna sensed the change, a slight unease threading through the excitement. As the dirigible hovered, its enormous shadow stretched over the tarmac, a shiver of apprehension rippled among the crowd. The ground crew moved with practiced efficiency, their voices rising above the wind, working against the elements to guide the airship safely. Yet, in the belly of the beast, unseen forces were gathering. Inside the Hindenburg, the atmosphere was a mix of relief and anticipation. Passengers busied themselves with their personal effects, eager to disembark and step into the new world that awaited them. The corridors echoed with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the impending doom lurking just out of sight. The hydrogen, a volatile ghost within the ship's cavernous shell, was restless. It danced invisibly, seeking freedom from its confines. The crew, aware of their burden's potential danger, moved with a sense of both duty and foreboding, their actions precise and focused. Yet no amount of caution could quell the winds of fate that had begun to stir. Just then, as the clock ticked over into the evening, a spark, imperceptible yet catastrophic, ignited the air. Fire erupted with a roar, a monstrous beast unleashed in an instant. The sky turned from serene blue to a hellish orange, the flames consuming the Hindenburg with a ravenous hunger. Anna felt the heat before she saw the flames. It was an intense wave, a wall of scorching air that knocked the breath from her lungs. She pulled Carl close, shielding him instinctively as the world around them dissolved into chaos. Screams pierced the evening air, a chorus of fear and disbelief. The inferno raged, black smoke billowing into the sky, marking the heavens with the ship's fiery demise. The once majestic dirigible was now a twisting, writhing serpent of flame, its metal skeleton exposed and vulnerable. The crowd scattered, people running in every direction, their silhouettes stark against the glow of the consuming fire. Anna, her heart pounding, held Carl tight, feeling his small body tremble against hers. The sound of the blaze was a living thing, roaring and crackling, drowning out all other noise. It was a symphony of destruction, each note a reminder of the fragility of dreams. In those terrible moments, time seemed to stretch, each second a lifetime. Anna's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and memories, her hopes for the future colliding with the harsh reality of the present. She thought of her husband, waiting for them in New York, unaware of the nightmare unfolding. The suffocating smell of burning fabric and metal filled the air, mingling with the acrid stench of fear. Around her, the ground crew and bystanders sprang into action, their movements frantic yet determined as they attempted to save lives amidst the wreckage. Their cries were a counterpoint to the fire's relentless advance, a testament to human resilience even in the face of unimaginable horror. As the inferno reached its peak, the structure of the Hindenburg began to collapse, its once proud frame bending and breaking under the intense heat. The air was thick with ash, swirling in a macabre dance, the remnants of the airship's grandeur reduced to cinders. Anna stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the devastation before her. In the midst of the chaos, a strange calm settled over her, a clarity born of desperation. She had to move, had to find safety for Carl and herself. The urgency of survival surged through her, propelling her forward through the turmoil. With the Hindenburg's demise etched indelibly into the sky, Anna and Carl fled the scene, their steps guided by instinct and sheer will. The world around them was a cacophony of sound and sensation, of fire and fear, yet Anna's focus was singular: escape. As they stumbled through the smoke and debris, the inferno behind them began to wane, its fury spent. The remains of the airship lay smoldering, a twisted monument to ambition and tragedy. For those who bore witness, the image would remain seared into their memories, a testament to both the heights of human achievement and the depths of its peril. Hours turned into an agonizing wait as rescuers worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from the wreckage, tending to the wounded and offering comfort to those left behind. As the last embers cooled, the reality of the disaster settled over Lakehurst, a pall of grief and disbelief. By the time the city woke, the news of the Hindenburg disaster had spread far and wide, carried on the wings of radio waves and newspaper headlines. It was a story of triumph turned to tragedy, a vivid reminder of the delicate balance between innovation and danger. For Anna and Carl, the journey to America continued, marked now by the indelible experience of that fateful night. The Hindenburg disaster was not just a historical event. It was a personal crucible, a moment that would shape their lives and the world they aspired to join. All as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the New Jersey sky in hues of orange and purple, the events of May 6, 1937 began to etch themselves into the annals of history. On the ground amidst the bustling preparations for the arrival of the Hindenburg stood young Thomas Meyer, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and unease. The air was charged not just with the promise of an extraordinary sight, a majestic airship descending, but with an unspoken tension that seemed to ripple through the gathering crowd. Thomas had come with his father, Friedrich, a German immigrant who had settled in America years before. For Friedrich, the arrival of the Hindenburg was more than just an impressive technological feat. It was a symbol of progress, of connection between the old world and the new. But for Thomas, it was all about the adventure. The sheer size of the airship, its sleek, silvery skin, reflecting the last light of day, filled him with wonder and a touch of trepidation. As the massive silhouette of the Hindenburg approached, time seemed to slow. The sound of ropes uncoiling, the distant hum of its engines, and the murmurs of the crowd formed a symphony of suspense. Thomas clutched his father's hand tighter, feeling the roughness of calloused skin, the strength and solidity that had always been his anchor. But then, without warning, something shifted. The air, once crisp with anticipation, now carried a sense of foreboding. A spark, almost imperceptible at first, ignited the giant vessel. The transformation from awe to horror was instantaneous. Flames erupted, consuming the airship with a ferocity that defied comprehension. In that moment, chaos has reigned. The sky, moments ago a canvas of serene twilight, was now a backdrop for devastation. People screamed, their voices a cacophony of fear and disbelief. Thomas felt his father's grip tighten, a silent promise of protection amid the pandemonium. Their eyes locked, a shared understanding passing between them, an unspoken vow to stay together. As the inferno unfolded, time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. The heat was unbearable, a searing force that drove the crowd back, but their eyes remained fixed on the scene. Thomas watched, transfixed, as crew and passengers leapt from the inferno, their silhouettes dark against the blazing backdrop. Some fell with grace, others with desperation, each one a testament to the human will to survive. Hours turned into an agonizing wait as rescue efforts began. The valiant struggles of firefighters and ground crew illuminated by the flickering light of the dying flames. Thomas and Friedrich remained rooted to the spot, unable to tear themselves away from the unfolding tragedy. The acrid smell of smoke and burnt fabric filled the air, a scent that would linger in their memories long after the fires had been extinguished. The night deepened, its darkness a stark contrast to the earlier blaze. The Hindenburg's skeletal remains loomed, a haunting silhouette against the night sky. As the chaos subsided, the weight of what had transpired settled on the shoulders of those who had witnessed it. Grief mingled with shock, a heavy blanket that draped itself over the gathered crowd. In the aftermath, Thomas and Friedrich found themselves among the helpers, compelled by a need to act, to do something, anything, to alleviate the suffering around them. They joined the volunteers, their hands moving through the wreckage with a numb determination. Each item they retrieved, each life they aided, was a step towards healing, however small. By the time the city woke, news of the disaster had spread far beyond the confines of Lakehurst. Radios crackled to life across the nation, broadcasting the grim details, the voice of Herbert Morrison's iconic report echoing through living rooms like a mournful requiem. For Thomas and his father, the world outside seemed distant, almost unreal. Their reality was the shattered remains of the Hindenburg, the lives altered forever by its fall. Yet amid the despair, there were glimmers of hope. Stories emerged of miraculous escapes, acts of heroism that shone through the darkness. Thomas heard tales of crew members who had risked their lives to save others, passengers who had clung to courage in the face of certain death. These stories became lifelines, threads of resilience woven into the fabric of tragedy. As dawn broke, casting its gentle light over the scene, Thomas felt the weight of the night lift ever so slightly. The air was cooler now, carrying with it the promise of a new day. He stood beside his father, their hands still entwined, and looked out at the remains of the Hindenburg. It was a sight he would never forget, a moment that had changed him irrevocably. For Friedrich, the disaster was a reminder of the fragility of life, the thin line between triumph and tragedy. But for Thomas, it was a forge, shaping him in ways he could not yet fathom. As they turned to leave, father and son walked side by side, their bond stronger for having weathered the storm together. In the years to come, the memory of that night would fade and blur, yet its impact would remain, a quiet undercurrent in their lives. And though the world would move on, the story of the Hindenburg, its fiery demise, and the people who bore witness would endure, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who faced the flames and emerged from the ashes. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the world awoke to the eerie silence that followed catastrophe. The airfield, once a bustling scene of anticipation, lay quiet. Charred remnants of the Hindenburg stood as haunting sentinels against the pale morning sky, whispering stories of splendor now consumed by flames. The acrid scent of burned metal and charred earth lingered, a persistent reminder of the inferno that had scorched the ground just hours before. In the small town of Lakehurst, people stirred from uneasy slumber, the events of the previous night replaying like a nightmare refusing to fade. Among them was Anna Fisher, a local seamstress whose husband Carl worked at the airfield. The night had been a blur of chaos and confusion, yet here, in the quiet of the morning, she felt the weight of what had transpired resting heavily on her chest. Anna's home was modest, filled with the echoes of a simpler time when her greatest concern was the hem of a dress or the color of thread. Now, as she peered out the kitchen window, her gaze fixed on the distant plume of smoke that still drifted lazily across the horizon. It was a sight that would be etched into her memory forever, a scar on the landscape of her life and the lives of so many others. Carl returned home just as the sun climbed higher, its rays spreading warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold reality they faced. His clothes smelled of smoke, his eyes haunted by the images they had captured. He embraced Anna with a tenderness born of shared survival, yet neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate, unnecessary even, in the face of such profound loss. By mid-morning, the airfield was a hive of activity once more, though now the mood was somber, reverent. Investigators swarmed the site, their voices hushed, movements deliberate. The charred skeleton of the Hindenburg lay sprawled across the field, a mangled testament to human ambition and its perilous dance with fate. Anna ventured to the airfield later that day, compelled by a need to see for herself the aftermath of what had been. As she approached, the scene that unfolded before her was surreal, almost unreal. Twisted girders jutted from the earth like skeletal fingers reaching for a sky still tinged with smoke. The wreckage was interspersed with personal artifacts, remnants of lives disrupted in the blink of an eye. Shoes, hats, charred luggage. The sight of a child's doll, its face smudged with soot, caught Anna's eye. She picked it up gently, cradling it in her hands as if it were a fragile living thing. In that moment, the weight of loss felt personal, intimate. She thought of the passengers, of those who had survived and those who had not. Each item scattered across the field was a silent witness to their stories, stories that would never be fully told. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field, Anna felt a shift within her, a resolve taking root. The tragedy, though immense and incomprehensible, kindled within her a determination to remember, to honor those who had perished not by forgetting, but by keeping their memory alive. Over the days and weeks that followed, the town of Lakehurst became a focal point of mourning and remembrance. Memorials were held, flowers laid at the site where dreams had been dashed against the hard earth. The world watched, listened, and learned, the legacy of the Hindenburg disaster echoing across continents. By the time the month drew to a close, life began to reclaim its rhythm, though altered by the shadow of what had occurred. The airfield, once a symbol of progress and hope, was now a solemn reminder of the frailty of human endeavors. But amid the sorrow, there was a quiet resilience, a collective resolve to forge ahead while carrying the weight of memory. Anna returned to her sewing, the rhythm of needle and thread offering a semblance of normalcy. Yet in her heart, she bore the enduring legacy of the disaster, a lesson in humility and remembrance. Her hands worked with renewed purpose, each stitch a tribute to survival, to the indomitable spirit that endures even in the face of unspeakable loss. The Hindenburg disaster left an indelible mark on history, a cautionary tale of ambition and the unpredictable nature of fate. For Anna, Carl, and the people of Lakehurst, it became a part of their identity, woven into the fabric of their lives like the very threads Anna used to sew. And as the years passed, the memory of that day persisted, a haunting reminder of the fragility of human dreams suspended in the air, forever caught between aspiration and tragedy.